Today, we dive into one of the most poignant masterpieces of modern literature, The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. We are going deep, I mean really deep, into the narrative foundations, exploring how that initial trauma, the paradoxical foster care, and the truly unique voice of the narrator shape the incredible journey of Liesel Meminger.
Welcome to Fact Horizon. This is where history meets mystery and facts define the future. We explore the profound truths of human existence, the wonders of the mind, and the secrets of the cosmos, all in one place. If you seek knowledge and wonder, you're in the right spot. Subscribe now and join our journey beyond the horizon.
So our mission today is to travel back, way back to 1939, right into the dark heart of Nazi Germany.
Specifically to a small gray town called Mulching, near Munich.
Exactly. We're going to zero in on those vital opening chapters from the prologue all the way through the kiss to really understand the painful world Liesel is thrown into.
And, the unusual forms of kindness that start to save her.
The first thing that hits you, the absolute defining characteristic, is the narrator.
It's death.
It is death. And he wastes no time, does he? He just comes right out and says, don't be afraid.
Yeah, he makes it very clear, I'm not violent, I'm not malicious. He says he's just a result.
A result. And he also says, I am constantly overestimating and underestimating humans. And you get the sense he's just tired. He needs a serious distraction from his own, crushing workload.
An immense workload, especially during the war. And what he really can't stand, what he tells us he can't stand, are the leftover humans.
The survivors.
The survivors. Those crumbling among the jigsaw puzzle of realization, despair, and surprise. He's not this menacing figure. He's more like a stressed-out bureaucrat.
That is a perfect way to put it. It's fascinating, isn't it? An entity that is literally death is so bothered by the living.
And to cope, he seeks out colors.
Right.
He focuses on them. He says he's a connoisseur of the spectrum, that he tries to enjoy every color he sees, a billion or so flavors, and a sky to slowly suck on. It's his personal way of processing all that horror.
Yeah. A poetic mechanism. And before the story even really kicks off, he gives us a little preview, doesn't he? A color palette for Liesel's entire life.
He does. He gives us a trailer almost.
So why do you think the author chose to do that? To give away these three specific colors right at the beginning?
Well, I think it acts as a kind of narrative flash forward. It immediately ties Liesel's very personal story to this grand, sweeping tragedy of the war.
Okay.
So the first time he saw her was defined by the color white. Blinding white snow the moment she steals her first book. The second time was tied to the blackness of the sky turning to charcoal during a plane crash. And the last time we saw her was marked by this devastating, what he calls a home-cooked red sky after a bombing.
So they're not just descriptions?
No, not at all. They're like emotional bookmarks. They signal these huge, violent pivots in her life.
That sets the stakes incredibly high right from page one. Death tells us the story is about, what, 6 things?
Among others, yeah. A girl, some words, an accordionist.
Some fanatical Germans, a Jewish fist fighter, and quite a lot of thievery.
He lays out this epic tragedy, but then we're immediately dropped into something so small and intensely personal.
The trauma of a 9-year-old girl.
Which brings us right to that chapter beside the railway line. Her traumatic entry into this world. The journey begins with her younger brother, Werner, dying. Right there on the train.
The imagery is it's heartbreakingly stark. The runner's body is described as sideways and dead.
And his blue eyes just staring at the floor.
The cold is almost its own character in that scene. The book says the whole globe was dressed in snow, and Liesel's tears were literally frozen to her face.
It's a world that is just consumed by cold, both, physically and emotionally.
So they get off the train in this nameless frozen town to bury him, and it's there, in that moment of just raw, overwhelming grief, that the first theft happens.
The pivotal act. There are 2 gravediggers, and one of them, just an apprentice, a boy of not more than 14, he drops a book.
A small black book with silver writing, the Gravedigger's Handbook.
And Liesel, even in her despair, she sees this something black and rectangular lodged in the snow, and she takes it.
It's such an instinctive reaction, isn't it?
Completely. It's a primal reaction to loss. In a world where her voice has just been silenced, she grabs a random collection of words.
And from there, the journey continues to Mulching, to Himmel Street.
Himmel Street, which literally means Heaven Street.
But the description is anything but. The houses are small, they look nervous, the air is gray, the color of Europe. The whole place feels claustrophobic.
And she's immediately hit with this profound trauma of abandonment and the shame that goes with it.
And we quickly learn that this abandonment is not just personal, it's political.
Right. She knows her mother was sick and poor, but she starts to realize her disappearance is tied to this strange word she kept hearing.
Communist.
Communist. And this is where the political reality of Nazi Germany really hits home. Her mother was taken away because of her political beliefs.
And Liesel's just left feeling like a lost, skinny child in another foreign place with more foreign people.
The fear and shame from that political label, she internalizes it. Her abandonment isn't just bad luck, it's a direct result of this oppressive system. It foreshadows everything.
What a way to start a new life. And she refuses to even get out of the car.
For nearly 15 minutes, they have to practically drag her out.
And that's when she meets the Hubermans, Rosa the aggressor, and Hans, the unexpected comfort.
The contrast is just immediate. Rosa is a force of nature, the woman with the iron fist.
Always performing Schimpfen.
That constant arguing and complaining, yeah. And she's always calling Liesel Salmensch.
Pig girl.
Right from the start. Just this high-volume, abrasive world.
But there's a really fascinating duality to Rosa's personality, isn't there? You have to pay attention.
Oh, absolutely. She curses her wealthy clients, all their money and laziness, but then she has to greet them with a dutiful smile to make sure the family gets paid.
So the Schimpfen, it's a release valve.
Exactly. For her own powerlessness, her own humiliation, she's trapped politically and economically, and all that anger just leaks out onto Liesel.
We see that in the nightly routine she enforces.
Forcing Liesel to clean the spit off the door. It's awful. But it's her way of trying to control the chaos around her.
And then there's Hans, the foster father, the complete opposite force.
Liesel sees his eyes and describes them as being made of kindness and silver, like soft silver melting.
She immediately feels safe. She thinks to herself, I understood that Hans Hubermann was worth a lot.
He's quiet, he's patient, his comfort is sensory. His smell a mix of dead cigarettes, decades of paint, and human skin.
He's a painter, after all. A man who works with color and light.
And his behavior, too. He just sits crumpled, almost halved in the chair every morning, never using the other bed.
Right.
It's this quiet, self-effacing posture that says so much about his character.
And the foundation of their incredible bond really begins that very first night in what Liesel calls the midnight class.
She's wetting the bed, which is completely understandable. The trauma, the nightmares about Werner.
And Hans just patiently cleans the sheets. And then he takes the stolen book.
The Gravedigger's Handbook.
And they go to the washroom, and he starts teaching her the letters.
It's such a beautiful act of subversion. He doesn't scold her for the bedwetting or, for stealing a book. He sees the trauma, and he immediately offers a solution.
And that solution is literacy.
And he uses these really unorthodox personal methods.
They eventually move the lessons to the basement, using whatever they have. Sandpaper to practice the shape of the letters.
And later, paint. Because the Hubermans have all these painting materials.
And that basement wall becomes this powerful symbol of resistance and connection. A fresh cement page, as she calls it.
That shared, forbidden secret built around a stolen book from a burial ground becomes their safe haven. It transforms a cold, dark cellar that will eventually become a bomb shelter.
Into a workshop.
A workshop for the future. In a country that's all about controlling words, Hans gives Liesel the tools to own them herself.
But despite all this private progress, school is a total disaster for her.
A complete disaster. She's a Lutheran in a Catholic school, which is one thing. But worse, she can't read or write.
So they stick her with the midget children, the really young ones, and she feels gigantic and humiliated.
Her whole ambition, she says, is just to get out of that midget class.
That humiliation really boils over during a class reading session, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. She tries to read, but just fails miserably. She ends up reciting these memorized bits from the Gravedigger's Handbook that have nothing to do with the actual text.
And the other kids just mock her, call her dumbcoff.
Stupid head.
And that illiteracy, combined with the shame of the communist label and her abandonment, it just explodes.
It manifests as violence. When a boy, Ludwig Schmeichel, taunts her, she just snaps. She screams, "I'm not stupid," and beats him up.
It's more than just a schoolyard fight.
And it's all of her trauma and shame boiling over and coming out physically. She's grieving, she's terrified, she's ashamed. It's a massive cumulative burden for a little girl.
But right around the same time, we get another glimpse of Rosa Hubermann's complex humanity.
We do. Liesel has written these letters to her mother full of hope, and she uses some of the ironing money to mail them.
Knowing full well a consequence is coming.
And it does. Rosa gives her a ferocious watch-chin, a good hiding.
But it's what happens right after that's so important.
Yes. Rosa leaked a little, and she says, almost under her breath, "I'm sorry, Liesel."
And Liesel realizes the apology isn't for the beating itself.
No, it's for the circumstances. For her own mother being taken away and for Rosa's own suffering as this impoverished woman in Nazi Germany.
That tiny moment of shared vulnerability, a tear from the iron fist, it changes everything.
It does. It allows Liesel to realize later that her mother and Rosa were both just victims of circumstance. It elevates Rosa from a simple tyrant to this complex, suffering woman who is also trapped. Her violence is a symptom of her powerlessness.
So if we synthesize all of this, these opening chapters, the entire architecture of Liesel's life is basically set up.
Completely. You have the crushing weight of her loss, the constant political danger that led to her abandonment.
And then this secret safe haven being built through literacy and this quiet, silver-eyed kindness from Hans.
It's a foundation built entirely on paradox. And Death frames it all by telling you this isn't a story about death, but a story witnessed by death.
Right.
And that framing makes every small act of decency, like Hans's patience or the shared secret of the basement wall, so profoundly important against this huge, dark backdrop of war and fanaticism.
And as Liesel starts to settle into this precarious new life, her world on Himmel Street begins to expand. She starts to connect with the other kids.
Particularly with Rudy Steiner, the lemon-haired boy next door.
That really launches us into the next phase of her story, doesn't it? Her development as the book thief.
Absolutely. So in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore Liesel's growing obsession with words, the significance of the bonfire where she steals her second book.
In the famous Jesse Owens incident. Rudy's daring choice and the beginning of his lifelong quest for a kiss.
The source material points out something fascinating. Liesel, though she's illiterate and terrified of getting a beating, she was willing to risk everything just to touch a book.
But she had no desire to steal them from school.
None. The hunger for the words she couldn't have outweighed the fear of the violence she knew she would get.
Which leaves us with a really powerful thought to consider.
Liesel's journey is all about finding power through language in a country that is actively weaponizing words and, burning books. We see her gain strength from a stolen manual about digging graves. She transforms a document about finality into a tool for a new beginning. So think about this. How desperate must the need for knowledge be when the simple act of reading becomes an act of quiet, life-affirming resistance?
Last time, we followed Liesel Meminger through her really tumultuous arrival on Himmel Street. She is reeling from the death of her younger brother, Werner, and clutching her first stolen property, the Gravedigger's Handbook.
Today, we are moving past that initial shock and focusing on the crucible where her future identity is forged. We're looking at the early, messy, and, deeply emotional bonds that define her life with Hans and Rosa Hubermann.
Right. And our mission for this deep dive is to explore exactly how that foundational emotional loyalty, specifically between Liesel and her, her gentle foster father Hans and her future best friend Rudy, is forged in the shadows of the Rising Reich. We're charting this growth through shared experiences of vulnerability, the transformative and, I think, resistant power of literacy, and the harsh immediate realities of poverty in mulching 1939.
Yeah, we'll be analyzing the sources, covering some really pivotal early chapters. The Jesse Owens incident, which, sets the stage for resistance. The Other Side of Sandpaper, where Hans begins his quiet revolution. And The Smell of Friendship, which charts Liesel's deepening relationships, the heavyweight champion of the schoolyard, where trauma just erupts into violence. And finally, The Joy of Cigarettes, which confronts the emotional cost of abandonment and poverty.
That is a tremendous amount of emotional ground to cover. These are the moments where Liesel stops being merely a victim of circumstance and starts becoming an active participant in her own life. Okay, let's unpack this crucial second phase, starting with the introduction of the boy who embodies innocent defiance, Rudy Steiner, and the bizarre historical moment that introduces him to us, the Jesse Owens incident.
Rudy Steiner is introduced to us as the neighbor boy, and he's destined to become Liesel's constant companion. The sources describe him visually, the quintessential German boy, lemon-haired, bony, with this permanent grin. But it's his initial story that immediately makes him an outsider, even as he represents the physical ideal of a German child.
The incident itself is incredible because it happened 2 years before Liesel even arrived. It takes place at Hubert Ophel, the local track. And Rudy, in this act of pure, misguided admiration, painted himself black using charcoal, and attempted to emulate Jesse Owens.
The American track star who famously won 4 gold medals at the 1936 Berlin Olympics. It's an act of deep, innocent, but profoundly provocative defiance.
It really is. And what's fascinating here is that the author uses this seemingly lighthearted incident to immediately anchor the children's story in the darkest possible political context.
Oh, absolutely. You have to remember the intense, almost manic energy surrounding the 1936 Olympics. Hitler had intended them as a global propaganda showcase for the supposed racial and physical superiority of the Aryan race.
Yeah.
So Owens's victory winning 4 golds right under Hitler's nose was a colossal public contradiction of that entire ideology.
It wasn't just a simple sports victory, it was an ideological defeat on Hitler's home turf. So for a German child in the hyper-nationalistic climate of 1938 or 1939, a time obsessed with generating 100% pure German sweat, as the source puts it, for him to idolize a Black American athlete who shattered that Aryan myth, it's not just childish mischief, it is genuinely dangerous.
And we see the weight of this danger reflected immediately in the reaction of Rudy's father, Alex Steiner. Alex, who we learn later, is a man fighting a constant battle to, maintain surface-level conformity. While struggling with his own moral conscience, he severely reprimanded Rudy. He wasn't punishing him for playing with charcoal. He was punishing him for existential political disobedience. He was terrified that his son's individual spirit would attract the attention of the authorities.
That is the essential definition of Rudy Steiner right there. He's a boy defined by contradiction and a search for unconventional heroism. He is a local celebrity, the boy who tried to be Jesse Owens, yet he lives under the shadow of his father's fear. It sets him up as the perfect foil and ally for Liesel, a girl defined by the forbidden label of communist.
And when he challenges Liesel to the 100-meter race shortly after they meet, we see his immediate character traits crystallize: defiance, athleticism, and his unshakable lover boy ambition. He sets the bet: if I beat you, I get to kiss you. This simple childhood wager establishes the foundational dynamic of their entire relationship. It's a mix of fierce competition, mutual challenge, and this unrequited, gentle affection that persists throughout the narrative.
Let's discuss the setting of that race for a second, because the source material is deeply intentional about grounding their youthful interactions in the darkening political reality of mulching. They are running through a city that is physically bearing the scars of fascism.
Yes, exactly. The author doesn't allow the reader or the children to escape the context. They run past specific landmarks. They race past Tommy Muller's window.
Twitcher, right.
A twitcher, yeah. The boy whose chronic twitching caused by cold and negligent doctors makes him physically imperfect in the eyes of the regime. They pass the massive, imposing town hall and the church, symbols of traditional authority.
And the atmosphere itself is just suffocating. It's described as dark and damp, a lengthy tube of gray. It paints mulching not as some quaint German village, but as a place just choked by political tension and poverty.
But the truly chilling detail is Schillerstrasse. This is where the physical, pervasive violence of anti-Semitism is brought home. Rudy points it out as the road of yellow stars, a place everyone sees but nobody wants to look at. The source material is just so explicit in its descriptions of physical deterioration being linked to persecution.
You mentioned the physical violence, and the sources describe this street not merely as neglected, but as physically wounded.
Precisely. Schillerstrasse is anthropomorphized. It's described as being shaped like a long, broken arm. The houses themselves possess lacerated windows and bruised walls, marked with the omnipresent yellow star of David. The author calls them lepers, infected sores on the injured German terrain. This is so crucial. It shows that persecution is not some theoretical concept in 1939 Molking. It is a visible, rotting reality. Their youthful running literally takes them past the physical evidence of the growing hatred.
So, Rudy offers this external defiance and a kind of fierce, youthful, and, let's be honest, slightly inappropriate loyalty. But the real core of Liesel's stability, the thing that provides her first true emotional shelter, is found elsewhere. It's found in the dark hours of the night with Hans Hubermann, centered entirely on the transformative power of literacy.
That transition from the external public danger represented by Rudy's actions to the internal private sanctuary offered by Hans is one of the novel's most powerful movements.
Yes.
That bond is forged in the immediate ongoing aftermath of Liesel's trauma, her nightmares about Werner, her dead brother.
Let's dedicate some serious time to the midnight class because it is a ritual of profound paternal devotion. The sources paint the scene with such sensory detail that it defines the essence of Hans's character.
Right.
Liesel suffers these terrifying nightmares, always waking up screaming for Werner, and Hans's response is not to try to fix the nightmares, but to simply absorb the pain.
Yes, the sources tell us this ritual takes place just after 2 o'clock every morning. Liesel would awaken, terrified, and crawl to Hans. She would cry into his sleeves and breathe him in, and the smell she absorbs is critical.
That smell. A mixture of dead cigarettes, decades of paint, and human skin. It's so specific. It is the smell of a working man, of experience, fatigue, and just comforting humanity. It is the antithesis of the cold, clean perfection demanded by the Reich.
Exactly. And the physical description of Hans during these hours highlights the immense sacrifice he's making. He is described as being crumpled, almost halved, in the chair. He doesn't move to the other bed. He stays awake and present, night after night, offering this quiet, unflinching presence. This is an act of deep, quiet resistance to the trauma that threatens to consume Liesel.
And it is in the midst of this shared trauma that the literacy journey begins, using Liesel's first stolen item, the Gravedigger's Handbook.
Yes, the book is a constant physical reminder of the trauma of loss. But Hans understands intuitively that for Liesel, conquering the words in that awful Graves book is an act of defiance against the pain. It's a way of domesticating the memory.
I think the key insight here is the transformation. Hans doesn't dismiss the book because it's a constant reminder of death. He embraces it as a foundation for life. He promises her, soon, you'll be able to read that awful Graves book with your eyes closed. And in doing that, he validates her desire to turn this dark, accidental artifact into a source of light and connection. It makes the act of reading inherently therapeutic.
What's also fascinating is Hans's humility. He admits he is not such a good reader himself, which immediately levels the playing field. Their learning is not an unequal instruction. It's a mutual journey, a private, clandestine collaboration that, necessarily excludes Rosa because of her temper and her focus on practical survival.
And this leads us to the physical, tactile nature of his teaching, which the sources beautifully title The Other Side of Sandpaper. Why start with sandpaper?
Because the alphabet becomes a physical, immediate, and gritty experience. They're poor, so they use what they have. Initially, they use sandpaper to practice writing the letters.
So she can feel it.
She can feel it. The shapes of the alphabet, the tools of her future, become something Liesel can touch, something that scratches back at her. This emphasis on touch creates a bond between the written word and the physical body, connecting memory and feeling.
And once the sandpaper runs out, the learning moves to the basement, which is perhaps the most significant symbolic location in the novel. This cold, dark, and damp space, which will later become their literal sanctuary for Max Vandenburg, is transformed into Liesel's first true classroom.
Exactly. Hans uses his primary tool, his oversupply of paint, to transform the cold, rough stone walls. He creates a fresh cement page on the wall, painting words for Liesel to spell and write. This is a profoundly symbolic act of creation. Hans takes a space associated with fear, storage, and cold, and literally paints the words of Liesel's future onto its surface. It becomes a warm classroom, filled not with expensive supplies, but with the scent of light and dust.
It's a visual metaphor for how Hans takes the raw, dangerous world, uses simple tools, and creates a refuge of instruction and safety. He's taking the mundane, a basement, some paint, and imbuing it with this revolutionary, life-affirming power.
And the relationship deepens beyond the basement into what the sources term the smell of friendship. They're often found sitting by a wooden planked bridge, writing and reading, solidifying this unique, quiet bond built entirely on shared vulnerability and stolen moments of education.
And during these moments, Hans occasionally pulls out his accordion.
Yes, his most prized possession. And Liesel notices a perplexed expression and a slight shift in him as he plays. This is a quiet, powerful piece of foreshadowing. Hans is not just playing music, he is performing a memory. That accordion holds a deeper story, a profound, complicated debt tied to a past war and his relationship with a Jewish man, Erich Vandenburg.
It's a beautiful narrative technique. The sound of the accordion, which is comforting and familiar to Liesel, is actually the sound of a ticking clock for Hans, a reminder of a life-saving promise he made that is about to come due.
Absolutely. His loyalty to Erich Vandenburg, symbolized by that accordion, is mirrored by his loyalty to Liesel. Both relationships are built on shared intimacy and quiet acts of defiance against an unfeeling world.
So while Liesel is building this incredible, quiet foundation of trust and literacy at home, her struggle to integrate this new knowledge into the formal school setting leads to a dramatic crisis, one that reveals the raw depth of her rage and the power of her emerging self-assertion.
Indeed. Despite Hans's midnight classes, Liesel's initial months in Molking were marked by severe educational failure. By late 1939, when she is moved up to her rightful age group, she still reads with great difficulty. The words are described as fooling her, strewn everywhere on the page.
And her advancement wasn't even due to merit, was it? It was forced because she was disruptive in the younger class, calling out answers directed to other children.
That's right. That is the first sign of her defiance. She knows the answers, but she can't perform them under the scrutiny of the formal setting. And this defiance and lack of conventional structure led her straight into the physical discipline of the school. The watch-in.
A good hiding.
A good hiding, administered by the terrifying Sister Maria, the Grim Reaper nun. The classroom is a highly regulated, fear-based environment which, reflects the wider society.
The humiliation culminates during progress tests in early November 1939. Liesel is too afraid to read in front of the class, and the nun tries to simply skip her name, attempting to just erase her failure by moving on.
And here we see the beautiful yet misguided intervention by Rudy. With his bony knees knocking, Rudy calls out, "Sister Maria, I think you forgot Liesel."
Oh, Rudy.
I know. He is trying to protect her from erasure, attempting to save her from the grim nun's silence, but in doing so, he inadvertently shines the brightest possible spotlight on her deepest source of shame. Her illiteracy.
That public humiliation is the immediate catalyst for violence. During the break, Liesel is subjected to repeated taunts, most viciously from Ludwig Smeichel, who calls her, "Dummkopf, you idiot."
The source material notes that the tally of these humiliating comments stood at 19, and by the 20th, Liesel snapped. This wasn't just about the taunts. It was the culmination of misery, boiling over the death of her brother, the loss of her mother, the shame of being illiterate, the fear of the nun, everything.
And her response is just shocking and visceral. She retaliates with immense misdirected fury.
She throws Schmeichel's book, kicks him violently in the vicinity of the groin, and then punches, claws, and obliterates him. The source describes her as being utterly consumed with rage. It's a burst of raw, untamed physical power born of psychological agony.
It's a moment of pure animalistic self-assertion. And her final, poignant declaration amidst the chaos is key. "I'm not stupid."
Yes.
Her rage is a desperate cry against the shame of illiteracy and the trauma of loss. She's physically fighting back against the world that is trying to label her, shame her, and obliterate her identity.
And the adrenaline-fueled rage doesn't stop there. She even attacks the poor, twitching Tommy Miller, simply because he was smiling with such absurdity. She can't articulate her pain, so she channels it into violence against the closest available targets.
And this spectacle earns her the mother of all corridor watch-ins from Sister Maria, which results in this fearful, cowed silence from the rest of the class.
The scene concludes with Liesel crouched in the gutter, weeping, and the author makes the psychological connection explicit. Her misery isn't just focused on the beating or the boys. It is a pain that travels from Himmel Street to the Führer, to the unfindable location of her real mother, and back again.
So her personal suffering is politicized. The shame of being a communist child and a non-reader is all rolled into one overwhelming primal emotion that she physically releases.
That scene truly marks a turning point in her psychological development. She learns that she will fight back. She will use her body to assert her identity, even if her fury is misdirected. This defiance is a vital part of her character, preparing her for the future acts of resistance and loyalty she will soon be forced to undertake.
That defiance, however, is set against the constant grinding reality of poverty, which is the final defining element of the Hubermann household in these early months. The pressure of constant economic anxiety defines Rosa, Hans, and Liesel's daily lives.
Oh yeah, the sources are clear. The Hubermans are broke, still paying off debts and paying rent quicker than the money could come in. This financial instability is the true source of Rosa Hubermann's volatile personality and her famous Schimpfen.
Her constant arguing and complaining.
Exactly. And let's unpack Schimpfen. It's often translated simply as scolding or yelling, but in the context of the novel and the German cultural environment, it's more complex. It's a form of emotional coping, a mechanism of control for Rosa, who is terrified of economic failure and social judgment in a totalitarian state that equates poverty with inadequacy.
Right. Her abrasive nature is a direct expression of her intense economic anxiety and the cultural pressures of wartime survival. Liesel's routine, for example, includes cleaning the spit off the door nightly, a small detail that just underscores the constant verbal abuse and tension in the home.
But the washing route provides a crucial counterpoint to the family's internal struggle. Liesel joins Rosa on these errands, delivering and collecting laundry and ironing from Mulching's wealthier residents. This gives Liesel a window into another class of German life.
And it reveals Rosa's private defiance.
It does. Rosa delivers the washing with a strained smile, accepting the payment, but as soon as the door closes, she immediately unleashes a torrent of curses upon the rich, lazy customers. This small, private act of class resentment is a crucial moment of shared reality between Liesel and Rosa.
It shows that beneath the anger, Rosa possesses a sense of injustice and a private disdain for conformity. And Liesel, in turn, cherishes the quiet reprieve of walking alone during these tasks, away from the constant arguing.
The true emotional weight of their poverty hits hardest around Christmas and Liesel's birthday. For Christmas, Liesel is overjoyed to receive a couple of books, including the Gravedigger's Handbook and another, which turns out to be The Shoulder Shrug. But her birthday, shortly after, reveals the crushing depth of the Hubermans' financial struggle. This is the segment titled, quite poignantly, The Joy of Cigarettes.
On her birthday, Liesel receives no gift, and the reason is simple and heartbreaking. Hans lacks the money even for the small, personal luxury of a single cigarette.
And this prompts Rosa to lash out, not at Liesel, but at Hans, blaming him for foolishly giving away the 2 books at Christmas. It just highlights that every single resource, even a simple cigarette, is a painful luxury measured against the immediate need for survival and rent money.
And this convergence of economic desperation and emotional longing leads Liesel to take a calculated, deeply painful risk that changes her understanding of her life forever.
She decides to use a tiny portion of the washing money she has accrued from their meager income to mail all her accumulated unsent letters to her birth mother.
And she knows.
Oh, she knows. She knows a severe punishment. A watch-in or beating awaits her, but the desperate, lingering hope of contact is worth the physical price. She is gambling her safety for a final assertion of her original familial love.
When the lie is discovered, the expected fury from Rosa arrives immediately, and it is violent. Rosa beats Liesel with a wooden spoon. But here is the critical pivot of Rosa Hubermann's character, the moment where her iron fist cracks and reveals a hidden, deep humanity.
Rosa's anger quickly dissolves into profound, unexpected sorrow. She leaked a little, the sources say, crying, and apologized. And Liesel realizes instantly that the apology is not for the hiding, it is for the brutal, final circumstance. Her mother will never write back, and Liesel will never see her again.
This is Rosa acknowledging, for the first time without venom or schimpfen, Liesel's deepest abandonment. She is weeping for Liesel's loss, not her own money. It's a moment of true, unadulterated mothering.
It is. It shows that Rosa's heart, though hardened by years of poverty and fear, remains capable of profound empathy. But this acceptance of finality is devastating for Liesel, who is left alone on the cold kitchen floor, contemplating the truth.
The truth that her mother, a communist, is gone forever, and her departure was the ultimate tragic proof of love and sacrifice.
And the author uses a vivid detail to capture this pain. The yellow tear. Liesel recalls feeling beaten in the dark, even though the only illumination came from the yellow light of the kitchen. That yellow tear symbolizes the contrast between the apparent light, the truth being revealed, and the darkness of her emotional reality. It is a painful realization that she is truly alone, separated from her birth family forever by the political winds of the time.
This moment, the acceptance of final abandonment, it prepares her psychologically. Her nightmares about Werner are reinforced, but now she also knows the bitter truth of her mother's suffering and her own political status as a communist child. She is emotionally hardened just in time for the political climate to explode.
The sources state explicitly that this acceptance prepares her for the answer to the question of her mother's suffering on Hitler's birthday, where words and political persecution become inseparable in a very public and fiery spectacle. She is now ready to understand the larger forces that destroyed her family.
What stands out to me most from this entire section is how the most protective, life-affirming acts, Hans teaching her to read, Rudy defending her from erasure, Rosa crying over her mother's accents, all occur in the midst of extreme chaos, both personal and political. Literacy doesn't just grant knowledge, it becomes a literal, tangible sanctuary built of paint and cement.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we see the children of Himmel Street being forced to navigate a world obsessed with 100% Aryan purity and political conformity. Rudy's choice of Jesse Owens as a hero, Liesel's status as a communist child, and their collective poverty set them against the dominant narrative, forcing them to find loyalty and truth in clandestine, personal spaces, in the basement classroom, or simply in the shared experience of the gutter. Their loyalty to each other is resistance by default.
We have reached the edge of part 2, right as Germany gears up for a massive national celebration Hitler's birthday. Liesel, having accepted the finality of her abandonment, is about to witness the true, destructive, and mobilizing power of words in a fiery spectacle.
Next time, that spectacle, the bonfire, provides Liesel with her second stolen book, a forbidden item called The Shoulder Shrug. We will explore her political awakening in the face of book burning and the surprising intervention of the mayor's wife.
And immediately following that chaos, an act of loyalty comes due. The promise Hans Hubermann made years ago, tied to that old accordion, arrives in the form of a secret guest, a gambit that will jeopardize the Hubermann family forever.
Prepare yourself, because in part 3, we meet the Jewish fistfighter, Max Vandenburg, and the ultimate gambles the Hubermans are forced to make in the name of profound, life-saving loyalty. Right, but in the chapters we're covering today, from Hitler's birthday 1940 all the way to the way home, the war stops being this sort of gray background hum.
Yeah, it starts actively invading her life. It demands a response from everyone in Mulching.
Exactly. This is really the definitive turning point, isn't it?
It is. It forces the Hubermans to move from this quiet, almost domestic resistance to taking an immense, a deadly gamble.
So our mission today is to really analyze that collision, the collision of national ideology with individual conscience.
We're tracking Liesel's second major act of thievery, which is prompted by the Führer's, poisonous rhetoric.
And then the extraordinary courage required for Hans and Rosa Hubermann to hide a Jewish man in their basement.
We'll confront the incendiary power of words during the book burning, watch Liesel turn that anger into action, and then we meet the man whose fate becomes tied to this small, struggling family.
Max Vandenburg, the Jewish fistfighter.
That's him. So let's start with the spectacle of Hitler's birthday. It's April 1940.
Mulching is putting on a show, just like every other town in the Third Reich. There are parades, marching bands, music.
And the grand finale, of course, is a massive bonfire. It's designed to purge the nation of what they call degenerate thinking. It's an overwhelming, highly nationalistic display.
And you feel that pressure to conform immediately, right? It just comes crashing into 33 Himmel Street.
Oh, absolutely. Rosa is panicked because they can't find their German flag to hang outside.
She's terrified that this one little oversight will be noticed. She warns Hans that the regime, the authorities will come for them.
And that domestic conflict, it just intensifies with the brief and frankly tragic arrival of their children, Hans Jr. and Trudy.
Hans Jr. in particular is such a perfect contrast to his father.
He has those same silver eyes as Papa, but the book has this chilling description. It says they've been Führer-ed. His loyalty is absolute. It's blinding him to the basic moral decency that his father represents.
And the argument they have is just brutal. Hans Jr., standing there in his crisp party uniform, he accuses his father of being a relic.
Yeah, he says, you're either for the Führer or against him, and I can see that you're against him.
I mean, that's an accusation that could get Hans Hubermann killed.
And Hans Sr.'s response is so quiet, but just devastatingly powerful. He says he's made many mistakes, but not joining the Nazi Party isn't one of them.
It's incredible. And Zusak uses Hans Jr.'s character here to foreshadow the whole regime's collapse, doesn't he?
He does, and with such brutal imagery. The novel tells us that Hans Jr. just vanishes in the name of the Führer, heading towards Stalingrad.
And that description of the sky there.
Bleached bedsheet white. It's haunting. It's the color of a blank slate, Devoid of life, just waiting to be splashed with blood.
His individual tragedy, freezing to death for a cause his father saw as inherently wrong, it really does symbolize the catastrophic end awaiting the entire German nation.
And that powerful tension, it's just amplified at the book burning itself.
Yeah, a man in a shiny brown uniform delivers what the text calls a Schreierei.
A theatrical, passionate exhibition of shouting. He's weaponizing language.
He's creating an enemy where there was none.
Exactly. He condemns anyone reaching into the German mind, spreading disease, and the targets are shouted for everyone to hear.
The immoral, the Kommunisten, the Juden, the Jews.
And here is where this huge political spectacle becomes deeply, personally agonizing for Liesel.
Because she hears that word, Communistin.
And she connects it. She connects it to the dark rooms and the suit-wearing men associated with the disappearance of her own mother.
It's just a moment of devastating clarity for her. Her young mind is finally piecing together all these fragments of her trauma.
So she asks Hans, is my mother a communist?
And then the follow-up. Did the Führer take her away?
And Hans, the man who has always tried to protect her with quiet music and kindness, he can't lie anymore. He confirms the worst.
I think he might have, yes.
Liesel's innocence, which was already battered, is just incinerated right there along with the books.
That realization that the leader she's been forced to admire is responsible for her profound primary loss. It triggers her most furious act yet.
She stays behind, watching the cleanup crew, just feeling this immense burning fury, and she spots 3 books that somehow survived the fire.
And on impulse, she snatches one. The shoulder shrug. It's a profound act of resistance.
The irony is so rich, isn't it? Her fury against the words of the Führer, the words that cost her her mother, it leads her to physically steal a book.
And not just any book, a banned book. It was targeted for burning specifically because its protagonist was Jewish and presented in a positive light. The Nazi regime considered that unforgivable.
Right, and this newly stolen book, this physical symbol of defiance, it really prepares the way for the arrival of the most dangerous, most life-altering figure Liesel will ever know.
Max Vandenburg.
So let's turn our attention to Max. He's introduced as the Jewish fist fighter.
In Stuttgart, he was known for fighting, for refusing to, as he says, die like that passively. He liked fighting back. But by 1940, all that physicality has just been stripped away.
He's reduced to hiding in a small black room. He's starving, waiting, in utter darkness.
The text describes his existence as hearing only the sound of a crease when he moved. It says he felt like a man in a paper suit.
It's an intensely powerful metaphor for dehumanization, for vulnerability.
And his only lifeline is his childhood friend, Walter Kugler. Walker manages to help him prepare for escape just before he's drafted.
And Walter provides Max with the ultimate, terrifying paradox. His escape kit contains a copy of Mein Kampf.
Carrying the enemy's manifesto, the book that calls for his complete annihilation, is Max's only chance for survival.
Taped inside are a key and a map. He has to literally hide within the pages of his persecutor. The depth of that irony is just crushing.
Max's journey to Mulching is all about ritual and silence. He's on the train, never daring to look up, tasting only those 2 words, Mein Kampf, in his mouth.
And then he walks from Passing to Mulching, counting his footsteps in groups of 13 for luck. He's imposing this rigid order onto the utter chaos of his flight.
And he arrives at 33 Himmel Street, exhausted, terrified, starving.
Which brings us to the core dilemma of this deep dive. The Hubermans' insane high-stakes bet. The stakes are maximum death.
So what prevents Hans from just walking away from this promise 20 years later in the face of the Third Reich? Is it loyalty or is it defiance?
It's both, I think, and it's all bound up in a debt of honor. The backstory goes all the way back to World War I.
Hans was 22, fighting in France, and Max's father, Erich Vandenburg, was his friend.
And Erich saved Hans's life. He nominated Hans to write letters for the captain, citing his immaculate handwriting.
That job pulled Hans away from a fatal battle. Erich died in his place.
Hans survived, Erich did not. So Hans honored Erich by giving his widow a piece of paper with his address and saying, if you ever need anything.
And he honors that promise 2 decades later when the need is literally life or death. Hans's entire life is defined by quiet loyalty to the people who deserve it, not the corrupt state.
When Max arrives, the situation is, the source material defines it with that very distinct, darkly humorous narration.
Very sticky indeed.
Yeah.
Frightfully sticky.
It's a wonderful example of the narrator, death, using this very British understatement to convey the gravity of the mortal danger they're now in.
And the immediate fallout is just purely human. Max, having starved for weeks, vomits up Rose's pea soup.
And this is where we see Rosa's iron fist crack, just a little.
Yes. Rosa, the woman who constantly screams and curses, she cleans up the mess and, so uncharacteristically, asks Max if he wants more.
The book calls it a considerable muzzling of her notorious mouth. That immediate abrasive kindness is profound. It shows her deeper, hidden moral compass.
But the danger is all too real. Hans has to immediately enforce the silence.
He takes Liesel down to the cold, lamplit basement for her lecture. He explains the connection to Erich, but then he has to deliver the extreme, terrifying consequences of revealing this secret.
He lays out the contract in no uncertain terms. They'll take you away from me, he says, and Max Mama and he will be dragged away, never to return.
Liesel, who is still processing her mother's fate from the book burning, just sobs uncontrollably.
But Hans has to force the commitment from her. If I ever ask you to keep a secret for me, you will do it.
And Liesel accepts. She accepts his terrifying promise, and their impossible new normal begins.
That new normal is defined by perpetual vigilance. The text captures the psychological burden just perfectly.
Imagine smiling after a slap in the face, then think of doing it 24 hours a day.
They have to project absolute conformity, absolute routine, while harboring the most dangerous secret possible.
And this shared secret, this shared danger, it forces an immediate and intense bond between Liesel and Max.
We have two survivors on Himmel Street, both marked by profound loss and agitation.
Max sleeps for 3 days straight, whispering names: Isaac, Aunt Ruth, Walter, Hitler.
Family, friend, enemy.
And they share a common affliction: nightmares. Liesel relives the trauma of her brother's death on the train.
And Max relives the agony and the guilt of his survival.
Their daily routine is structured entirely around Max's survival. He comes upstairs to sleep by the fireplace at night for warmth, with the curtains clamped tight, and has to return to the cold, dark basement during the day.
The source material refers to Max's retreat as the Jewish rat back to his hole. That grim phrasing is so brutal it just underscores the forced dehumanization of his existence.
But what I find most compelling is how Max fights back against this dehumanization, drawing on his history as a fighter.
Right. Liesel notices him doing push-ups on the cold concrete floor.
And he explains he's training. He's training for a new dream he has while she's awake.
He deliberately turns out the lamp, waits in the darkness, and imagines the Führer coming down those concrete steps to find him.
And then Max and the Führer fight for hours. Max is often beaten, bleeding, but he fights back against the words, the power, the physical threat of the entire Nazi ideology embodied in one figure.
This is so much more than just a coping mechanism, isn't it?
It's an exercise in intellectual and psychological sovereignty. Max's internal war is the only territory of self-determination he has left. It's a mental sanctuary where physical oppression has no power. He chooses to fight, even if it's only in his head.
And the ultimate expression of that mental resistance lies in his connection with Liesel.
It really does.
You have Liesel, the girl who steals words from the fire, and Max, the man who is forced to carry the enemy's words. They're both struggling in the dark, but they find this common ground in language.
And Max, seeing Liesel's hunger for words, transforms the instrument of his oppression. He takes the pages of Mein Kampf, the book that defines him as disposable, and he covers them entirely with white paint.
And then uses charcoal to write his own story for Liesel.
It's a stunning reversal of power. He literally erases the Führer's poisonous text and replaces it with his own narrative of connection and humanity.
The standover man. It's such a powerful intellectual act. It demonstrates that even when your existence is reduced to hiding in a cold hole, you can take the enemy's weapon and repurpose it as a shield.
And as a gift. Absolutely. The gift is a story of shared agitation and resilience, and it cements the extraordinary bond between the word thief and the word maker.
They both understand the immense power of language, one used for destruction, and the other now used for creation and connection.
We've traced the narrative arc from Hitler's rhetoric, which terrified Rosa and provoked Liesel's thievery, right through to Hans Hubermann's steadfast fidelity.
Risking everything based on an old World War I promise. The cost is immense, perpetual fear and vigilance. But the result is Max and Liesel finding shared salvation in language deep in a German basement.
And as a final thought, what's fascinating is that Max's creation, the standover man, isn't just a distraction for a little girl.
No.
It's proof that resistance doesn't always require a gun or a bomb. Sometimes the most dangerous act you can commit against a totalitarian state is the act of creation, of defining yourself outside of their hateful terms.
That story is far from over. Join us next time for Part 4, where we explore the deepening, beautiful, and tragic bond between the book thief and the Jewish man in the basement, and see how their commitment to language and each other becomes their only true defense. Our mission today is, it's absolutely critical. We are deeply analyzing the arrival of Max Vandenburg, the Jewish fist fighter, and the extraordinary, almost suicidal decision by Hans Hubermann to shelter him.
This is the moment, isn't it? The moment the story really changes.
It's the moment the war stops being something on the periphery, something you hear about on the radio, and it walks right into their kitchen. This is where the Hubermann's fragile domestic life, which was slowly built on, shared reading and small acts of kindness.
All that work in the basement with the paint and the sandpaper.
Exactly. All of that is violently intersected by the war's true terrifying horror. We are doing a deep dive into the psychological architecture of loyalty, inherited trauma, and the sheer physical reality of survival built within the freezing confines of a cold German basement.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The moment we enter part 4, which is titled The Standover Man, the entire narrative premise of the book just shifts on its axis.
It really does.
The casual poverty, the petty thefts with Rudy, the schoolyard skirmishes, they all just vanish under the weight of this single deadly secret.
The fragility of their life on Himmel Street is completely laid bare.
And yet, and this is the key, this radical decision by Hans Hubermann wasn't a sudden impulse. It wasn't just a moment of compassion. Its roots reach back 20 years.
All the way back to the mud and violence of the Great War.
So to understand why Hans Hubermann would risk everything, his life, Rose's life, Liesel's life, we have to go back.
We have to. To understand Hans Hubermann's act of immense moral courage, an act that risks his entire family's destruction, we have to start with that foundational moment detailed in the chapter The Accordionist.
Right. We're going back to France, World War I.
We travel back to France. Hans is 22 years old, and the sources are very, very clear in this point. He was not a heroic figure, not in the traditional sense.
So he wasn't the brave soldier charging ahead.
No, not at all. He was unremarkable in combat, always described as running in the middle of the pack, just trying to survive. He's not a coward, but he's not a hero. He's just a man.
And it's fascinating that the quality that saves him is completely unrelated to warfare itself. It wasn't his strength or his speed.
No, it was a civilian skill, a quiet, almost bureaucratic skill. His immaculate handwriting.
It's an incredible detail, a story about how, administrative competence can literally save your life in the middle of a battle.
Precisely. His life is saved by an act of sheer generosity and sacrifice by a fellow German soldier, Erich Vandenburg, who of course happens to be Max's father.
And how does that play out?
The platoon is called to attack a particularly dangerous area, and Erich Vandenburg, who has noticed Hans's skill with a pen, he volunteers Hans to stay back and write letters for the captain.
And Hans just agrees.
He agrees, purely out of, convenience. It beats running into machine gun fire. And that single assignment ensures Hans misses the disastrous, fatal attack that kills the entire platoon, every single one of them, including Erich.
The sources make this moment so poignant, introducing Death's perspective to frame the senselessness of it all. Death notes that young men think they're running at other young men. They're running at me.
It's a devastating line.
And Hans, simply by agreeing to write a letter, was granted this massive reprieve. Death says he was too lucky, or perhaps destined to live for this exact moment 20 years later, indebted to a Jewish man he barely knew.
The psychological analysis here is profound. This is classic existential survivor's guilt, but it's transformed into a lifelong radical obligation. It's not just a feeling, it's a debt.
So in his own mind, his life isn't even his own anymore.
It's borrowed time. The debt is quantifiable, and it's owed directly to Erich's lineage. This debt becomes the single defining feature of Hans's moral compass for the next 2 decades.
And the accordion.
The accordion, which Erich taught Hans to play, becomes the physical symbol of that debt. It's an instrument of grief, of memory, and of a promise. Every time he plays it, he's remembering Erich.
And the sources detail how Hans immediately tries to pay that debt, even though he knows nothing can truly pay it.
He travels back to Stuttgart after the war. He finds Erich's widow, and he realizes that money is pointless, and words are completely inadequate. What can you say?
So he offers something else.
He offers to paint her apartment for free. It wasn't a large payment. It wasn't grand. It was just a desperate human attempt to honor a life. This act cements the promise.
And this is where he first meets Max.
It is. While he's there, a small child, Max, wanders in described as skinny with soft hair and murky eyes. Hans plays the accordion one last time in that room, which is just heavy with sadness, and in doing so, he secures that promise for the next generation.
So that promise, made to a dead man in the mud of France, now attaches itself to the living child who would one day need saving.
Exactly. The debt is transferred.
So if this debt defines him, we have to look at how his prior actions factor into the current risk. Because Hans had already established a pattern of, transgression against the rising Nazi regime.
Yes, and that only compounds the current danger exponentially. This isn't his first time pushing back.
This is where we see the moral inevitability of his actions. It's not a surprise he does this.
It isn't. Hans had already refused to fully join the NSDAP, not out of some organized resistance movement, but out of a simple, deeply held sense of right and wrong it conflicted with the party's core tenets.
And this had consequences, long before Max arrived.
Oh, absolutely. Because of this refusal, he began to be known locally as Der Fudenmaler, the Jew painter, for continuing to accept commissions painting Jewish homes when other, more, party-line people refused.
And we get that specific, terrifying example of him trying to actively counteract the rising tide of anti-Semitism, the shopfront.
The shopfront. This was his grievous error in the eyes of the party, painting over anti-Jewish slurs, specifically on Joel Kleinman's shopfront. He attempted to strike the NSDAP office door in his rage and disgust after being confronted. These weren't quiet internal thoughts. These were public, visible acts of defiance.
And that refusal to join the party was essentially economic suicide in Hitler's Germany. It isolated him socially, financially.
Completely. His silver eyes, which are so often associated with his kindness and soft demeanor, they also carry the stigma of being an uncooperative German, a potential political liability.
So when Hans chooses to hide Max, the son of the man who saved him, this pre-existing transgression makes the act exponentially more dangerous.
They're already watching him. He's already on a list somewhere.
It creates a moral inevitability. Hans has been rolling the dice, so to speak, for years, risking his future for his conscience.
And now, the stakes are everything. The arrival of Max Vandenburg is the culmination of that 20-year-old promise. Walter Kugler, Max's friend, delivers Max to the nearest connection point. Max arrives in Molching carrying almost nothing. A small suitcase, a map, a key taped inside the cover of Mein Kampf.
And the instruction to look at page 13 for luck. The choice of that book is just staggering.
It's a punch to the gut. Max, whose nickname is the Struggler, travels entirely unprotected, hiding in plain sight with the very book that symbolizes the persecution that forces him to hide.
The book is both the proof of his danger and the bizarre mechanism of his momentary safety.
And we see that struggle immediately. Max has to rely entirely on this old debt and on the kindness of this family he has never met. He is utterly dependent, completely wrecked physically.
But spiritually untorn.
Yes, he is walking into the center of the storm, relying on a promise made to his dead father.
When we are introduced to Max Vandenburg, we don't meet a broken victim. We meet the Jewish fist fighter, an identity forged in this aggressive physical resistance. What are the key elements of his youth that inform his incredible determination to survive?
His entire youth is defined by a deep, almost primal refusal to submit. He lost his father young, and then a really formative experience, he witnessed the slow, passive death of his uncle.
And that really stuck with him.
It did. He was horrified and disappointed by his uncle's accepting, tranquil face. He swore to himself right then and there he would never die like that, passively without a fight.
And that decision, that wasn't just an internal thought. It translated directly into action.
It absolutely does. This fuels Max's decision to fight regularly at a reserve on Staber Street, often against what the source material calls archetypal Germans. He's fighting through joy and fear.
The specifics of his record, 10 wins, 3 losses, that's less important than the act itself.
Yeah.
Much less important. This was his crucial way of asserting agency and self-worth against a world that was systematically trying to strip him of it. The fight was the thing.
It's the brilliant commotion of asserting existence. He thought if they killed him tonight, at least he would die alive. It's an internal philosophy that gives him the strength to endure the weeks and months in hiding that are to come.
Exactly. Fighting provided him with control and a sense of self-respect. But when the persecution intensified, when the fists were no longer enough, his resistance had to turn inward. It had to become psychological warfare.
So describe the journey to Molching, because it must have been an absolute psychological siege, forcing him to inhabit the language of his tormentor just to survive.
The source material is just heartbreaking when describing his isolation before the journey. Max in the small black room, starving, feeling like a man in a paper suit. When he moves, there is the sound of a crease.
That detail is so vivid.
And he's waiting in paralyzing fear, looking for light that feels explosive to the eyes like a gun. But the train journey, that is the ultimate act of psychological camouflage. He travels reading Mein Kampf.
Imagine forcing yourself to ingest the poison. The text says he only tastes 2 words over and over. Mein Kampf. My struggle.
It's his struggle and Hitler's struggle all at once.
This isn't just reading. It's an act of profound self-inflicted torture. He has to absorb the very words and propaganda responsible for his misery just to blend in. The book is his shield, but carrying it is spiritual torment.
And the arrival at Himmel Street captures this tension perfectly. He counts his steps in groups of 13 for luck, resisting every single impulse to smile, to sob, or even to imagine safety.
He reminds himself this was no time for hope.
Exactly. He arrives with that electric combination of nourishment and nausea, physically and mentally wrecked, but he is there. He made it.
The moment Max appears in the Hubermann kitchen, the Hubermann predicament explodes into this terrifying silent motion. We often focus on Hans, but Rosa Hubermann's reaction, her terrifying pragmatism, is just as crucial to their immediate survival.
Oh, absolutely. Her initial reaction is shock, and she mutters, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, another one, after Max vomits from eating too much too quickly. But the genius of Rosa's portrayal here is the immediate shift.
The shift away from her usual self.
Yes, from her usual schimpfing, the cursing and scolding, to this cold, calculated practicality. She instantly understands the logistics of survival.
Right. It's no longer about yelling at Liesel for misplacing a hairbrush. It's about life and death.
The division of food, the whispered instructions, the meticulous disposal of Max's excrement. Hans prudently takes the empty paint can out back. It all signals that life is irrevocably altered, and they must now maintain the facade of normalcy at all costs.
The business of hiding a Jew, as the book says, means smiling after a slap in the face 24 hours a day.
It's a constant performance.
And the immediate, most important psychological contract has to be established with Liesel, who is suddenly carrying a deadly secret at age 11. Hans delivers what the book calls Liesel's lecture, and it is quiet, sharp, and utterly devastating.
Hans knows that simple appeals to kindness or love won't work in a fascist state. That's not enough to guarantee silence. He has to instill existential terror.
He has to make the stakes real for her.
He approaches her with these quiet words that feel like a physical blow, and he lays out the ultimate cost. They'll take you away from me. They'll drag that man up there away, and maybe Mama and me too, and we will never, ever come back.
This lecture is so crucial because it cements Liesel's loyalty not just out of familial love, but out of pure self-preservation.
It has to.
Hans isn't being cruel here. He's being brutally honest about the political realities. He forces Liesel to shoulder the weight of the secret, transforming her from a child into a genuine accomplice and solidifying her status as the silent guardian of the basement.
With Max installed, the physical space of the basement at 33 Himmel Street transforms overnight, making it one of the most complex metaphors in the entire novel.
It really is. In Part 3, we saw its original purpose. It was Hans and Liesel's midnight class.
A space for intellectual growth, where they painted words from the Gravedigger's Handbook on the wall. It was warm, metaphorically, with the joy of learning.
But now, in Part 4, it becomes a terrifying necessity. It's Max's hiding spot, a cold, dark, damp, concrete space. The text uses that gut-punching metaphor, forcing him to feel like the Jewish rat back to his hole.
A truly awful image.
But Max, the fistfighter, he refuses to just be a victim. Psychologically, he immediately attempts to reclaim agency, to transform the space of victimhood into a contained fighting ring.
The basement is defined by this profound dichotomy.
Yeah.
It is a prison, necessitated by the world above, but it is also a sanctuary for internal resistance.
A training ground.
The silence and the cold force Max's internal conflict to the surface. He begins a rigorous, necessary training regimen, daily push-ups and sit-ups. He's 24, 15 pounds lighter from starvation, barely hitting 10 push-ups at first, his arms snapping at the elbow.
And the section is called The Gamblers, and Max is gambling his sanity on fighting. He's training for a physical confrontation he knows he will never have a fight with the Führer.
And here's where Max's psychological defiance reaches its apex, the basement visions. Unable to physically fight the regime, Max fights the symbol of the regime in his mind.
This is an incredible sequence.
He imagines a boxing ring in the dark where he challenges Hitler. The entire nation cheers Hitler on, and Max is just pounded like a punching bag. The vision is brutally vivid. Jewish blood was everywhere, like red rain clouds on the white sky canvas at their feet.
That fantasy confrontation is so essential to his survival. Max is mentally forcing the confrontation on his own terms. He is resisting the total victimhood that the regime demands of him.
Yes, the fight lasts hours in his head. The entire nation pounds him, but he gathers himself to his feet. He refuses to stay down. He always gets up.
And then in this vision, Liesel appears.
And then Liesel appears in the mental ring, bringing him a newspaper with an empty crossword. This detail grounds the fantasy. It's the ultimate metaphor. Even in his darkest, most violent moment of internal conflict, Liesel offers him words.
A way out of the darkness.
A way to channel his energy. Max is training for the fight, but Liesel is preparing him for the survival after the fight. The intellectual, soulful survival.
And this leads us directly to the swapping of nightmares, the immediate, profound psychological connection built between Liesel and Max.
Yes. She watches him sleep for 3 days straight. She's obsessed with checking if he's still breathing, and she starts noting their similarities. Both arrived in the state of agitation, both haunted by the ghosts of their journey.
They are linked by shared trauma.
Deeply. Liesel is still haunted by her brother Werner's death on the train. She wakes up screaming about the snow and the smell of the station. And Max, even in his sleep, is reciting a checklist of the people who define his existence. Isaac, Aunt Ruth, Sarah, Mama, Walter, Hitler.
Family, friend, enemy.
He is literally running through his memories to confirm his own existence.
They are two people connected by the shared weight of what they have lost and the shared terror of the present. By watching each other, by knowing the other person understands the trauma, they provide this silent, mutual recovery.
The basement, in that moment, is no longer just cold and concrete. It's a mutual recovery room built on a silent understanding, on fear, and on a shared language of loss.
And we see the profound nature of this bond foreshadowed for later when Max falls gravely ill in Part 6, and Liesel finds solace not in physical medicine but in reading him the dream carrier.
It is through words that they both heal and stay alive.
The ultimate expression of this unique connection is the gift Max creates for Liesel, the standover man. And this gift is so much more than a thank you. It's a monumental act of spiritual defiance.
It's turning the words of hate into instruments of friendship and shared survival.
We must pause and consider the medium itself, the physical object.
We have to. Max physically takes the suffocating, painted-over pages of Hitler's Mein Kampf, the very book responsible for his literal suffocation and hiding, and he transforms them.
He paints over them.
With thick gray paint. He whitewashes the hateful rhetoric, creating a canvas for his own story, illustrated with his own self-made sketches. This is literary sabotage of the highest order. It's an act of pure defiance.
The process must have been so intense. Max is painting over the Führer's words, page by page, absorbing the smell of the paint and the history of the paper beneath.
We feel the sensory experience. The smell of the paint fumes, the texture of the repurposed pages, the emotional labor of committing this defiance.
And the illustrations.
Max's illustrations. The sun, the clouds, the bird, and eventually Liesel herself. They're simple, almost childlike, but incredibly potent. He is asserting that the human spirit and personal narrative can physically overwrite propaganda.
And Max's core message to Liesel is beautiful and surprising. It fundamentally redefines the relationship between the powerful and the helpless.
He recounts that all his life he was scared of men standing over him. The bullies, the oppressors, the soldiers, the Führer.
But then he says Liesel is a standover man.
He realizes that Liesel, the small, watchful girl, is the best standover man he has ever known. She stands guard, not oppressively, but protectively. She is there for him. She is the presence that gives him comfort, not fear.
And Liesel reads and views Max's gift 3 times immediately. The sources note that the pages, even painted over, are noisy, like static around the written story.
That's such a brilliant line. It's a constant tactile reminder that the propaganda is still buried beneath the paint.
It's a powerful statement. The words of destruction are literally silenced, but their presence remains a palpable threat. They're still there.
This gift initiates a period of profound shared creativity. They deepen their bond through literary activity, continuing the tradition. Hans started with the sandpaper and the gravedigger's handbook. The basement becomes their joint creative workshop.
They paint words onto the wall together. Liesel paints words up to 12 times, taking in the odor of paint fumes and cement.
The very air of the basement is infused with their desperate attempt to create meaning and growth amidst terror.
This environment is where Liesel's trauma, her loss, her rage, her fear is channeled into structured language.
And Max, as the writer and artist, legitimizes her developing relationship with words. He validates her hunger for language. And this contrast is key. Liesel's early books were stolen objects of necessity.
Right, grabbed from a book burning or from the mayor's library.
But Max's self-made book, born of necessity and defiance, is true literature. It solidifies their shared identity. The girl who seals words and the man who writes them.
They're both using the power of language to resist a regime that is built on linguistic manipulation and propaganda.
A beautiful symmetry.
As this intense, hidden life in the basement establishes a fragile routine, the world outside begins closing in, signaled by the growing dangers of the war. We move into Part V, The Whistler, where the concept of risk is immediately expanded from an individual's secret to a societal collapse.
Liesel is now operating under the constant pressure of the Jew in my basement secret. Her sanctuary remains the mayor's library, where she's reading The Whistler in early 1941.
She's using the physical presence of books as this brief, beautiful escape from the toxic air of Himmel Street.
And that book itself, The Whistler, becomes an emblem of their desperate existence. It foreshadows the intense loyalty between Rudy and Liesel, literally floating down the Amper River in icy Decemberish water, only to be retrieved by Rudy.
Who, of course, uses the freezing effort to finally demand his kiss.
Of course, it's a moment of lighthearted persistence set against this dark, dark backdrop of winter and war.
That seemingly frivolous act of theft and recovery is sharply contrasted with the genuine struggles Rudy and Liesel face against hunger. Their thievery is driven by necessity, not malice.
No, they're still attached to Arthur Berg's gang, stealing apples and bread, just trying to fill their empty stomachs.
We see that great anecdote detailing their successful theft of bread and speck-fatty ham from Otto Sturm, even resorting to icing the road to cause a spill.
But crucially, their gang leader, Arthur Berg, immediately demonstrates what the book calls an incongruous moral aptitude.
This is a critical distinction that reflects the ethical decay of Germany itself.
It really is.
Yeah.
Arthur Berg, despite being a thief, he forces Rudy to return the basket to Otto Sturm. He steals out of genuine need, but he maintains a code of honor. He's driven by survival, not sadism.
But the nature of thievery changes immediately when the leadership shifts. Victor Kemmel replaces Arthur Berg.
And this shift symbolizes the corruption of innocence. We're moving from necessity to cruelty.
Victor is wealthy. He doesn't need to steal.
Exactly. He's powerful in a small domain, and he steals because he enjoys exercising control and inflicting pain. He embodies the principle of entitlement, explicitly claiming wanting more is our fundamental right as Germans.
He's a petty tyrant, fueled by privilege and cruelty.
And Victor is the one who later finds the stolen copy of The Whistler and spitefully throws it into the freezing Amper River, forcing Rudy to risk hypothermia just to retrieve Liesel's comfort.
The expanding war serves as the constant, looming threat that will ultimately shatter the sanctuary of the basement. The text introduces the concept of fate and risk, using the profound metaphor of the seven-sided die. We need to fully unpack that image.
The seven-sided die represents the unnatural, the impossibility of avoiding consequences, and the high-stakes gamble Hans Hubermann undertook. When Germany invades Russia on June 24, 1941, the war exponentially increases the danger for everyone, especially for a family hiding a Jew.
So the hidden Jew is the seven-sided die that Hans rolled years ago with Erich Vandenburg.
Precisely. The source explains that you roll the die, and, deep down it had to come up 7, the one result that somehow finds a way to hurt you and take everything. It represents the moral inevitability of consequences in a world gone wrong.
And the consequences start immediately, serving as a powerful foreshadowing.
They do. The immediate consequence, though seemingly small in the grand context of a world war, is punishment. The mayor, due to economic hardship, fires Rosa from her laundry route.
This economic isolation, directly linked to the burgeoning global conflict, is framed as a clear signal of the inevitable cost of hiding Max. The world is closing in on Himmel Street.
The gamble of Hans Hubermann is constantly feeding on his chest, a low, thrumming anxiety. The source material continually links the personal struggles on Himmel Street, Liesel's thieving, Max's training, the Hubermann struggle for money, to the massive catastrophic events unfolding across the globe.
Ensuring that Max's presence remains the central, defining, life-threatening crisis for everyone involved.
And the genius of the narrative structure here is that it confirms to you, the listener, that the price will not just be economic, it will be existential. The weight of the world is literally pressing down on the concrete ceiling of that basement.
If we look back at the core themes of this section, we see the monumental price of loyalty exemplified by Hans Hubermann, whose debt from a war 20 years past defines his perilous present.
And we witness the transformative power of shared trauma that builds the unique, silent bond between Liesel and Max, two children who found connection in mutual loss.
And critically, we analyze the basement, which begins as a cold hole for a Jewish rat, but becomes the forge of human resilience and creative defiance, literally painted over with new words.
Max takes the book meant to destroy him, Mein Kampf, and transforms it, page by page, into The Standover Man, a foundational book of survival and true human connection for Liesel.
The transformation Max achieves is extraordinary. It is the ultimate act of reclaiming agency, overriding hate with personal narrative. This raises an important question for you to consider. What words in your own life, whether of past bitterness, self-doubt, or the destructive rhetoric of others, must you paint over or erase entirely to make space for connection and true humanity? The act of physical and mental transformation is often the greatest act of survival.
Indeed. The words we silence or replace are often just as important as the ones we labor to create.
In Part 5, we will witness the terror of the skies as air raids begin, and the world of Himmel Street starts to crumble, bringing the outside war violently to their very doorstep. Join us next time. We are jumping into a period of, well, just extreme and escalating tension within the narrative.
Absolutely.
We've moved past that initial, that stomach-churning shock of Max Vandenburg's arrival.
Right, at 33 Himmel Street.
And we've settled into what you can only describe as a terrifying new routine. Our sources really focus on this crucial stretch of time where the external war, which had previously felt almost like background noise.
It violently intersects with their lives.
Violently and physically. It crashes right into the Hubermans' fragile secret existence.
And our mission here it's pretty intense and focused. We want to understand how the smallest, most deeply ingrained acts of human kindness.
A spontaneous moment, right.
Exactly. A moment of generosity, or even just sharing a story. How do those things become catastrophic in a world that's defined by this absolute, unforgiving political fanaticism?
Right.
We're covering the narrative arcs from Max's new regiment of defiance, through Rudy's struggles, the shock of the air raids arriving in Molking,
And then the big one.
and culminating, crucially, in that irreversible tragedy. The one that stems from Hans Hubermann's simple moral decision to share a piece of bread.
It's the segment where we really see how words, whether it's the Führer's torrents or Liesel's quiet reading, they transform into literal tools.
Tools of comfort, survival, and ultimately political resistance.
The narrative has definitely moved past just simple fear. It's now this state of chronic rolling anxiety.
That's a great way to put it.
And the source summarizes the Huberman situation, this three-way partnership built on a secret. It calls it rolling a seven-sided die.
And that metaphor is just brilliant.
Is it?
It's from the chapter The Gamblers, and it captures the statistical inevitability of it all. You just can't continue an act of high treason like that indefinitely under a totalitarian regime.
Impossible.
So the routine of hiding Max, it becomes defined by this constant, debilitating, low-level paranoia. The text even says there was such gravity between them, Hans and Rosa.
Because the secret is a physical thing.
It is. It's monumental and heavy, this force just pulling them down, affecting every single mundane decision.
Like how much water to use for a bath.
Or how they divide a single loaf of bread. It touches everything.
And what really stands out, for me at least, is how the secret forces this profound and really unexpected change in Rosa Huberman.
The Soman's shouting tyrant we've come to know.
Exactly. The source describes a considerable muzzling of her notorious mouth. I find that phrasing so insightful.
It's a perfect description. Her whole personality, that caustic shield she used to protect her family, is now turned inward. It has to be silenced by the sheer size of the risk.
It's a huge character transformation.
And is driven entirely by moral imperative and necessity. Rosa always had that strong moral core. You could see it when she took in Liesel.
That it was buried deep.
Deep under layers of fury. Now she sacrifices her own identity, her voice, for this secret. She just focuses entirely on Max's survival, meticulously dividing the food.
Even her own rations.
Right, showing what the book calls a beleaguered acceptance of what had transpired. It's not enthusiasm, it's duty. It shows you that if Hans is the moral compass, Rosa is the engine of survival.
And it's a heavy burden. It requires these terrifying new routines. Hans has to handle the whole logistical nightmare.
Food, hot water, waste disposal.
All of it. And always under the cover of darkness. So while they're managing all that upstairs, Max is fighting this deep internal battle confined to the basement.
And that confinement, that darkness, it forces him to find agency. He can't just wait to disappear. So his coping mechanisms get channeled through physical training and through art.
Okay, so let's unpack that Max's inner world, because this is where his defiance really starts to take root. In the dark, he has to keep fighting, not just for his life, but for his sense of self. He starts with fitness.
He begins with push-ups and sit-ups. Now, remember, Max was a street fighter in Stuttgart, but after months of hiding and starving, his body just protests.
The text is heartbreaking there.
It is. It notes that where he once did 50 push-ups easily, he can now barely manage 10. His muscles feel like cake.
Wow.
But he keeps at it. After a week, he's doing 3 sets of 16 push-ups, 22 sit-ups. This physical discipline is Max's way of preventing himself from disappearing, from dissolving into the dark.
But the real battle is psychological, isn't it? It's all contained in what he calls his new dream.
Precisely, that's the real arena. He creates this mental space where he can exercise the agency that reality denies him. He turns off the lamp, waits in the dark, and imagines the Führer descending the basement steps.
Coming down from the world of light into Max's personal hell.
Exactly. And in this new dream, they fight for hours. His physical training is literally for this fantasy showdown.
And the imagery is so stark. The crowd climbs out of the walls, cheering for the Führer.
It symbolizes that ubiquitous Nazi propaganda, right? It's everywhere. But Max refuses to give in,
He fights until he's exhausted.
often picturing blood in Hitler's mustache. He is trying to literally punch out the propaganda that's hunting him. He's repurposing the dark, a place of fear, into a gymnasium, an arena of resistance.
And his art is just as powerful. We saw the Standover Man painted over Mein Kampf. What about the new sketches he's creating now? They feel, I don't know, more violent.
They're absolutely acts of psychological defiance. He's using the oppressor's own words as his canvas. The source details these visions, drawn right over the text of Mein Kampf.
Max throwing punches.
Fighting for his life. And the effort is immense. He visualizes the ground splashed with Jewish blood like red rain clouds.
That phrase, red rain clouds, it connects directly back to Death's observations of the colors of war.
It does. It's the constant threat of bloody consequence hanging over everything.
And crucially, when he's beaten down in these visions, the last person to enter the ring is Liesel.
Yes. She comes in, holding an empty crossword, offering comfort and connection. This deeply foreshadows their partnership.
Yeah.
Max knows that Liesel, through her love of words, is his only real tether to the world, his only hope.
So the sketches aren't just fear. They're maps of his reliance on the Hubermans.
Especially on Liesel.
Now, that fight is, of course, profoundly draining. Let's pivot and contrast Max's internal battles with the turmoil hitting Liesel and Rudy outside during 1941. It wasn't just the World War, it was the microaggressions of the Hitler Youth.
Yes, if Max's fight is internal, theirs is becoming increasingly physical and public. Rudy's spirit just clashes violently with the rigidity of the Nazi system, especially under the brutal leadership of Franz Deutscher.
Deutscher really seems to represent that petty, small-minded cruelty that fascism just enables.
He's the embodiment of it. Rudy is subjected to these grueling running drills, these pointless punishments. The most famous example, of course, is when he's asked for the Führer's birthday.
April 20, 1889.
And Rudy deliberately answers with the birth of Christ. Even throws in Bethlehem for good measure.
It's a small act of defiance, but a costly one.
It's a refusal to prioritize Hitler over anything else. And the consequence for that intellectual defiance,
Swift and brutal.
thrown to the pavement. It shows that even a young boy's nonconformity is met with immediate physical control. The system demands total subservience of thought, not just action.
And Deutscher's brutality pushes them toward a new form of resistance.
Thievery. They join a gang.
They move from opportunistic stealing, like with Arthur Berg, to something more organized, driven by desperation. They're hungry. They call themselves the losers.
They want the good life, as Rudy called it. But the new leader they find, Victor Kemmel, he embodies the worst of unchecked German authority. Kemmel doesn't steal because he's hungry.
He steals for the enjoyment of it, for power.
Exactly. And his background is so important here, isn't it?
They're absolutely crucial.
He lives in a villa that was fumigated after the Jewish family who owned it was driven out. He's the inheritor of stolen wealth. And it breeds this entitlement, this casual cruelty. He even says, wanting more is our fundamental right as Germans.
He's fascism in miniature.
Cruel, arbitrary, and purely ego-driven. And his presence just elevates the stakes of their petty crime from hunger to a life-or-death power game.
Which climaxes in what the narrative calls the floating book, part 2.
It's the moment Kemmel's cruelty targets Liesel's spirit, not just her stomach. After they refuse his one lousy apple, Rudy spits at his feet.
A small act of defiance.
That seals the revenge plot. Kemmel waits 5 months for his opportunity.
And when he finds them, he demands Liesel's most prized possession.
The Whistler. The book she stole from the bonfire. It's a symbol of her heart, her intellectual freedom, her connection to Max and Hans.
And Kemmel treats it with total contempt.
He knows what it symbolizes. He mocks Rudy about Jesse Owens, then performs a discus spin himself, and releases the Whistler into the Emperor River.
And the imagery there is just... It's heartbreaking. The book hits the water, claps, and floats away. Liesel is horrified. Her salvation becomes a floating book, completely exposed, mirroring Max's own vulnerability.
And it's such a powerful moment. A book, saved from fire, a symbol of Nazi censorship, is now surrendered to ice-cold water by a petty, entitled German youth.
But Rudy, seeing her distress, immediately performs this act of pure friendship. He jumps in
Into the icy December-ish water to rescue it. It's his final act of stupid gallantry in this part of the story.
He gets the book and demands his long-awaited kiss.
Which is such a beautiful, absurdly youthful moment set against this backdrop of fascist cruelty. But his act, jumping into freezing water for something so important, it mirrors the importance words are about to take on when the war comes crashing down on Himmel Street.
Literally from the sky.
Literally.
And that crash is Act 2. The war is no longer a headline. It is forcing the citizens of Mulching into deep bomb shelters.
This shifting reality is terrifying. Everyone from Himmel Street rushes to the Fiedler shelter, which is described as being much sturdier and considerably deeper.
Which immediately makes you think of Max,
who cannot share in this collective safety.
The atmosphere of fear during these raids is one of the most vividly described parts of the book. The source uses the German term, angst.
An unpleasant, often strong emotion caused by anticipation or awareness of danger. And the fear is physical. The air pressure shoved itself down like a ceiling.
The sensory details are overwhelming. Rosa, the loud salmon shouter, is reduced to a whisper.
A dead song at her cardboard lips. The people stand in a lumpy circle holding hands, just waiting for their final demise. It's a collective, paralyzing terror.
And before the real raids, there's that critical Sky Stealer incident. It's a false alarm, but for Max, it's monumental.
It's an act of profound psychological suffering. While everyone else is in the Fiedler's basement, Max is tempted. He's been hiding for 22 months. He goes upstairs and opens the curtain just a crack.
And what he sees is devastating.
The stars burn my eyes.
I find that so resonant. It symbolizes his longing for the stolen world, the sheer immensity of what's been taken from him. Even the sight of nature is physically painful.
It reminds him of his disconnection. He stole a single glimpse of the sky, and the act itself injures him.
It just underscores his immense vulnerability.
And when the family returns, he's traumatized. He just says, "I couldn't help it," and explains that the stars burned him. He retreats to the basement, unable to process it.
The next raid is real, September 19th. And this time, in the shelter, Liesel undergoes her transformation into the word shaker.
She finds a new purpose, her voice. As children are wailing, Liesel, on Hans's prompting, starts to read from the Whistler. The book Rudy saved.
And the effect is immediate.
Profound. For at least 20 minutes, she handed out the story. The youngest kids are soothed, the adults are distracted. They're visualizing the story, not the bombs.
This is more than just reading, isn't it? She's literally distributing the words. She's turning them into an antidote for the collective angst.
And this is where the literary technique comes full circle. Max had already sketched the story, the word shaker. In it, Liesel grows a huge tree of words that resists the Führer's axemen. She is the shaker.
So when she reads in the shelter, she is physically fulfilling Max's prophetic vision of her.
Exactly. She is the word shaker who distributes hope. It validates Max's belief that shared language is the only weapon that can truly defeat the tyranny of the Führer's words.
But the air raids bring danger from above, and the inspections bring it right to their doorstep.
A party man arrives with a measuring tape, checking basements for suitability as bomb shelters. It's a bureaucratic check that could expose Max in an instant.
This is a spike in tension that is almost unbearable. Hans's quick thinking is critical here.
He tells the family to act normal. We don't even go down there, not a care in the world. They have to project casual disinterest in the face of absolute disaster.
The narrative calls it the longest 3 minutes in Hubermann history.
The fear is auditory. They listen to the Nazi footsteps echoing in their basement, the sound of the measuring tape slapping against the concrete. Liesel can only imagine Max huddled right beneath the steps.
The vulnerability in that moment is agonizing.
It is. The party man leaves, convinced the basement is too shallow. But the aftermath reveals the true depth of the trauma this has inflicted on Max.
When they rush downstairs, what do they find?
He's sitting beneath the steps, holding his rusty scissors like a knife. He was prepared to fight if discovered, but his words immediately turned to guilt.
I'm so sorry I put you through that.
He recognizes the burden he represents.
And that the family's composure has cracked.
That near exposure elevates the danger. But it takes an impulsive act of profound humanity from Hans Hubermann to shatter their peace entirely. This is Acts 3, the reckoning. This is the moral climax of the entire section. In October, the hidden reality of the concentration camps marches right through Molching, a procession of Jewish prisoners destined for Dachau.
Described as starving skulls.
With staggering legs, seeking an explanation from the onlookers, a desperate plea for humanity.
And Hans, a man defined by his moral compass, simply cannot stand by and watch.
He can't. As he watches the suffering faces of depleted men, he gives in to pure, irreversible instinct. He reaches into his paint cart and pulls out a piece of bread like magic.
It breaks through the crowd.
And gives it to a prisoner. The man falls to his knees, thanking him. It's a small, futile miracle. Futile because it can't change the war, but it defines Hans entirely.
It's a profound act of kindness, a direct challenge to the regime, and the system answers immediately.
With violence. Retribution is instant and brutal. A soldier arrives, studies the scene, and whips the Jew 6 times. The text is graphic, noting blood dripping from the man's ear.
Then he turns his attention to Hans.
Hans is struck 4 times. The sound of the whip sickens Liesel. She watches her papa fall to the ground. She and Rudy are bound together by this shared trauma.
But as Hans recovers, the gravity of his mistake, the risk to Max, hits him. His heroism is eclipsed by guilt.
It's instantaneous and crippling. Oh my God, Liesel, what have I done? He knows he's just announced to the entire town that he's a Jew lover. A search of his home is now inevitable.
The ultimate price for this moral stand is Max's departure.
They have to act immediately. That same night at 11 p.m., Max walks up Himmel Street with a suitcase. He has to desert them to protect them.
Liesel waves from the window.
He doesn't wave back. He has to cut the cord cleanly. His final words are heartbreakingly simple. You've done enough.
And his departure creates this intense silence, a void that completely refutes any dictionary definition of quiet or calm.
Silence was not quiet or calm, and it was not peace. It was devastation.
Hans, just ravaged by guilt, descends into a state of self-punishment. He's called the idiot.
He just waits, drinking bitter coffee, waiting for the Gestapo. And when they don't come immediately, he feels even worse, fearing Max left for no reason.
But the fear turns real in a cold, bureaucratic way.
Precisely. He's not arrested. A letter arrives drafting him into the German army. It's the perfect bureaucratic punishment. He's assigned to the LSE, the Air Raid Special Unit.
His immediate fear is being sent to Russia, to Stalingrad, like his son.
But his assignment is a different kind of hell. He's sent to Stuttgart, then Essen. His job is to remain above ground during air raids, put out fires, rescue the trapped. The men give it an unofficial name.
Leichensammler Einheit.
Dead body collectors.
The ultimate cruel irony. The man who risked his life for one Jewish person is now collecting the fragmented bodies of his own countrymen.
The psychological toll is immense. He witnesses profound, repetitive grief. He has to learn, as the book says, the art of forgetting just to survive the next night.
And now we get to the incredible, dark irony of Reinhold Zucker's fate. A petty grudge saves Hans's life.
Reinhold Zucker, a younger man in the unit, resented Hans fiercely. Not over ideology, but because Hans won his cigarettes in a card game.
So petty.
Zucker threw the cigarettes back, saying, "I don't need your charity, old man." A few weeks later, the truck they're in blows a tire and rolls.
And just before the accident,
Zucker, still stewing over the cigarettes, demands Hans switch seats, because Hans was in his seat. Hans, exhausted, just does it. When the truck rolls, Hans survives with a broken leg. Zucker's killed instantly.
it's one of death's most insightful commentaries. One seat, 2 men, a short argument, and me. It kills me sometimes how people die.
It's thematic gold. Hans's self-sacrifice led to punishment, and he's saved from that punishment by an act of pure, petty spite. It suggests the moral order has no bearing on physical survival in wartime.
His broken leg saves him. The sergeant ensures he's sent back to Munich for office work. It's the ultimate absurd irony.
And while Hans is facing that, Rudy is dealing with his own reckoning back in Molching. His father, Alex, is conscripted. Rudy is furious, disillusioned.
And the Nazi regime tries to commodify his body in a sinister way.
He and other boys are summoned for a physical examination, naked, to see if they're suitable for the elite Nazi schools. The nurse says they are creating a new class of physically and mentally advanced Germans.
It's a horrifying historical detail, eugenics in action. The system wants to extract the perfect physical specimen, devoid of independent thought.
And this moment becomes a symbol of the threat to own their very beings. Liesel thinks about the humiliation of it all.
The image of Rudy naked becomes a constant presence in her mind, a vision of dread.
It confirms the system's terrifying effort to categorize and use them as instruments. Rudy isn't a boy. He's a potential resource for the Third Reich.
And through all this, Max's legacy remains Liesel's anchor. She still has the word shaker.
Her most important inheritance from him. It's a profound political parable. The Führer has used words to grow a forest of tyranny that chokes everything else.
But Liesel shakes the words free. She grows a massive tree of resistance and connection.
The contrast is the key. The Führer uses words like axes to chop down hope. But Max, the young man in the story, climbs the tree using nails. Painful effort to rescue Liesel. The message is that words, used by a tyrant to control, can be transformed by shared love into instruments of salvation.
It's a beautifully realized metaphor.
And when Liesel reads this after Max's departure, she finally understands. She wondered where he was in that forest out there. Then she realizes, of course I know where he is. He exists in the shared language, the stories they created together.
The narrative culminates with Hans's unexpected homecoming in early April 1943, a momentary, fragile peace.
It's a crucial decompression before the final storm. Hans tells him everything. The LSE, the smoke, the lost souls, the bizarre accident with Zucker. They sit at the kitchen table, processing the trauma.
And the final sound of this act is one of hope.
Hans fulfills his promise to play the accordion. The source gives us the scene. Music, soup, and jokes, and the laughter of a 14-year-old girl. This temporary happiness earned through so much suffering is the calm before the ultimate destruction.
This segment has really detailed the tremendous cost of conscience and survival. Hans Hubermann's spontaneous act of generosity led directly to Max's exile and his own conscription.
It showed the unforgiving nature of the regime. And yet Liesel found her voice, her courage, cemented by Max's legacy, preparing her for what's to come.
The historical tension has now been fully realized. Max is gone, Rudy is marked, Hans is back only by a cruel twist of fate. The war is physically on Himmel Street.
So we leave you with the core question. Will these small, shared acts of resistance, these words of kindness and love cemented in stories, will they be enough to save them from the full force of the coming destruction?
In our final installment, Part 6, we will reach the heartbreaking conclusion of Himmel Street and hear Death's final thoughts on humanity.
Today we conclude our epic series on the book thief. This is the final Part 6. Our mission today is maybe the most solemn one we've undertaken in this series.
Yeah.
We have to unpack this conclusion with the detail and reverence it deserves.
Absolutely.
We need to focus intensely on Liesel's final devastating moments with Hans, Rosa, and of course Rudy. And then we have to pivot and examine the lasting legacy of her own book, the memoir she wrote in the basement.
And crucially, we have to dedicate some serious time to grasping the full philosophical weight of Deck's final, really startling confession about humanity.
It's the line that the entire novel builds toward.
It is. It's an ending that defines the entire novel, forcing us and you to confront the deepest contradictions of the human spirit.
Okay, so let's unpack this journey toward the inevitable end. We have to start with the immediate precursors, which we find in the chapter titled The Last Human Stranger.
Right.
We last left Liesel completely changed, just shattered after Max was captured and marched on that brutal walk to Dachau.
She was just overwhelmed by the sheer devastating duality of words she'd witnessed. On one hand, you have Hitler's rhetoric.
The poison.
The poison, exactly. And on the other, you have Max's kind, handwritten stories written on painted-over pages of Mein Kampf.
This torment, it leads her to her final, pivotal act of thievery and a crucial internal conflict at the mayor's library.
Yes. This moment, her final visit to Ilse Hermann's beautiful, orderly library, is where Liesel finally turns on the very thing that has been her salvation.
Language itself.
Language. She is just flooded with the memory of all these atrocities. He's remembering Werner, her dead brother. Her mother, who she lost, and now Max, who she fears she has lost forever to the regime. She sees those perfect rows of books, and in this explosive fit of rage and grief.
She calls them lovely bastards.
Lovely bastards. And that phrase is just a thunderbolt of insight for her, isn't it?
It's perfect. It perfectly encapsulates that duality. She recognizes that words are capable of enabling the most profound evil in Hitler's voice, the torrent of language that shaped a nation into a destructive, hating force.
But those same words were also her greatest comfort.
They were everything to her. The medium of her friendship with Hans, the shelter Max offered her in his stories, the very foundation of her identity.
And this internal conflict, it gets so severe that it becomes physical.
Right. She doesn't just steal a book this time.
No, she attacks one. She literally tears pages from a book in a moment of pure, blinding frustration. She even questions out loud,
What good are the words?
exactly. If they can be used to build concentration camps, if they can justify mass murder, then what is the point of reading? What is the point of all this knowledge?
It's a moment of profound spiritual crisis for her. But what's incredible is that it immediately triggers an even more profound
The
realization.
one that changes everything.
The realization that without the power of language,
Führer was nothing.
nothing. His entire regime, his power, it wasn't built on steel or bullets, fundamentally. It was built on sound waves and printed text.
You take away the words, and his influence it dissolves. And this is the moment that redirects her entire life path.
She goes from being a word thief.
To a word creator. It's the ultimate turning point of resilience for her. She understands that if words can destroy, they must also be, wieldable for creation.
For resistance.
For resistance and for self-preservation. And that is why she goes straight back to 33 Himmel Street and begins writing her own story.
And she doesn't write it in just any old notebook. She writes her memoir, The Book Thief, in the one space she knows is truly safe.
The basement.
That physical space, which was Max's hidden refuge for nearly 2 years, now becomes the site of her creation. It's the final essential act of processing her pain and bearing witness to the beauty she experienced there.
And this act of creation, as we find out, is what saves her. Zusak makes the irony just terrifyingly clear.
He does. Death notes his final peaceful visual of her before the cataclysm strikes mulching.
And what a visual it is. Liesel's in the basement, totally absorbed in her work. She's looking up at Max Vandenburg's paint-written artwork on the wall.
The tightrope cloud, the dripping sun.
The figures walking toward it, all that imagery of his struggle and their shared hope. She is lost in the world that she's created, rereading the last sentence she wrote for many hours.
That sense of immersion, of being physically and mentally anchored in her story and Max's art, is literally what saved her life.
It elevates the basement from just being a storage space or a shelter into a crucible of creation, and ultimately an accidental survival mechanism against the destructive power that was about to level everything above ground.
And to really grasp the thematic weight of Liesel's survival, we have to connect it back to the story Max gave her.
The word shaker.
Yes. That parable serves as this profound metaphor for Liesel's entire life and for the resilience of human connection against the industrialized efficiency of fascism.
It's so important. Can we just quickly revisit the core image of that story?
Please do.
Well, Max writes that Hitler planted destructive words like seeds, and from them grew a forest of pure propaganda and hate.
And people would climb these word trees, shouting their leader's rhetoric.
Exactly. But Liesel, the word shaker, she's different. Her kindness, her ability to give Max comfort and connection, it causes a single tree to grow, one strong enough that Max can climb it to reach her.
And when the tree falls, what do?
They walk down the trunk of that fallen tree. They've carved a path right through the destructive forest of propaganda.
It's such a beautiful, powerful image.
It is, and it confirms that Liesel is not merely a thief of words taking the spoils of war for comfort. She is a shaker, a planter, and ultimately a powerful writer whose words carry the weight of human dignity.
She uses language to build, while the Führer uses it to destroy.
And that focus on creation, tragically, gave Liesel one thing the people above ground lacked. Time. Which brings us to the immediate and devastating collapse of Himmel Street. We have to now move to part 2, the end of the world, the detailed and intensely tragic account of the bombing.
Yeah, this section must be approached with immense solemnity, matching the tone that Death himself adopts. He sets the stage with this chilling, atmospheric detail that suggests the inevitability of it all.
He describes the sky as dripping.
Like a tap a child couldn't quite turn off. It's such an almost domestic small detail right before this cataclysmic event.
And we have to acknowledge the heartbreaking irony that the residents of Mulching held onto.
That small, sad hope.
That small, sad hope that no one would possibly bomb a place named Himmel Street, Heaven Street. They believed they were shielded, maybe by fate, maybe just by the name itself.
But they were not.
They were not. And the central tragedy of this attack is defined by its sheer speed and the fatal failure of the alert system.
Death whispers those terrifying words. Too late now.
Too late now. The sirens began to howl, but the warnings came with the bombs.
There was no time. They didn't have those critical minutes. They needed to seek the deeper, safer shelter that the Fiedler's house provided during earlier, smaller raids.
It was instantaneous destruction. It wasn't a sustained barrage. It was one decisive strike aimed at the poorer, working-class part of Mulching.
And the source material, it details this terrible roll call of streets targeted.
Meminger, Ellenberg, Johansen, and Himmel. Death notes that Himmel Street was instantly flattened. Houses splashed across the landscape. The very ground which had borne witness to so much hidden kindness was just torn apart.
And because the warning came too late, we are presented with this devastating image of victims who died exactly where they slept or where they waited.
And Death describes these individual losses with a heartbreaking precision that just strips away the abstraction of mass casualties.
He finds Frau Holzapfel first.
Right. He finds her waiting for me in the kitchen. There's a broken cup in front of her.
And Death, ever the observer, notes that her face seemed to be asking him with this weary resignation.
Just what in the hell had taken me so long?
Think about that final image. Frau Holzapfel, who started the war as this bitter, broken woman, but found a final, profound connection with Liesel through the reading of stories.
Through the act of sharing words. Her final moment is one of quiet waiting, not panic. It confirms the quiet dignity she regained through that connection.
Then there's Frau Diller, the sharp-tongued, staunchly pro-regime shop owner.
She was found asleep. Her bulletproof glasses, as the text calls them, shattered next to her. Her shop was utterly obliterated.
But there's that small, potent detail that speaks volumes about the ideological collapse that's happening at the same time.
Yes, the framed photograph of Hitler. The destruction of the house was so complete that the picture was ripped from the wall and, as Death says, positively mugged and beaten to a glass-shattering pulp.
He even steps on it on his way out.
He does. It's a chilling piece of symbolism. The total physical destruction of the regime's idols contrasted with the quiet, personal dignity of the deaths of the good people.
And then we reach the Steiners. The description of the Steiner children, including Rudy, it might be the most heartbreaking passage in the entire novel.
It's hard to read. Rudy lay next to his sister Bettina on the very edge of the bed.
And the children died fast and they were warm.
Death takes their souls while they are still nestled in the blanket, still warm from sleep. It is an act of strange mercy, in a way.
But for Death, it's more than just a collection. He recognizes Rudy.
He does. He identifies him not by his golden hair or his youthful mischief, but by his most profound act of radical kindness.
He calls him the boy from the plain, I thought. The one with the teddy bear.
And this is such a crucial analytical point. Rudy spent his life chasing trivialities, a kiss, winning a race, impressing Liesel. But his final, eternal identity is defined by a silent act of grace.
Giving a dying enemy pilot a teddy bear as a final comfort.
His last act of humanity is the one Death carries with him. It positions Rudy's life as a testament to radical, uncalculated compassion. He died a hero of empathy long after he stopped believing in the Hitler Youth.
It gives his death this immense thematic significance, but of course it doesn't lessen the pain of the loss. Which brings us back to Liesel. How did she survive this utter annihilation?
It is the ultimate testament to the theme of words and resistance. The answer is concrete, and it's completely circular. The basement.
The rescuers found Liesel deep in the collapsed cellar, still clutching the manuscript of her book, The Book Thief.
The very activity that kept her downstairs, writing, creating, being lost in her story, was the mechanism of her physical survival against the destructive power that leveled everything above ground.
Her story saved her life.
Literally.
The act of creation proved stronger than the act of destruction.
And that leads us directly into the terrible dawn of grief in Part 3. The world is destroyed, and Liesel is pulled from the rubble.
Her first sound is described as a stunning scream of the living. It's the sound of shock, of incomprehension. And physically, we see this terrible echo of her beginning.
Her fingers are bleeding.
Just as they had been years earlier, frozen and bloody, when she first arrived on Himmel Street, gripping the gravedigger's handbook.
That detail is just devastating. The bookends of her time on Himmel Street are defined by bleeding hands and the presence of death.
But in this immediate aftermath, her sense of awareness returns slowly. And it's anchored not by a person, but by a profoundly familiar object.
She spots an LSE worker carrying a broken accordion case.
And Zusak writes that the sight of the white teeth and black notes of the instrument, damaged but visible, smiled at her, and violently triggered her awareness of the horror she was now surrounded by.
That image is so potent. The accordion wasn't just Hans's instrument. It was his soul.
His voice.
His voice, his source of income, the symbol of his constant silver-eyed kindness. For it to smile at her amid the death suggests that Hans's spirit, his presence, is the bridge back to reality for her.
And she insists, that's my papa's accordion.
She takes it, right before the full terrible scale of the damage just slams into her.
Her journey of searching and grief from this point is agonizing. She sees Frau Holzapfel scissored on the ground. She sees the obliteration of her street.
And then she finds Rudy.
This is the moment we and Death have been waiting for since the very beginning of their friendship. Rudy, the boy who constantly begged her for a kiss, especially after the Jesse Owens incident.
Only to be refused by her, that stubborn, beloved soulman.
She kneels down beside him, realizing with this sickening finality that he will never ask again.
And she leans in, finally performing the act she had so long withheld.
The source notes that their teeth collided on the demolished world of Himmel Street. It's an act of belated love and ultimate farewell.
An expression of the love she couldn't articulate in life, finally offered on a landscape of total destruction.
And the grief just compounds as she stumbles on. She discovers her foster parents' bodies tangled in the gravel.
Rosa, the iron-fisted, soft-hearted Summensch, is found with her lips fixed in the shape of an incomplete snore.
A final, mundane sound caught in eternity.
And then Hans, Liesel's anchor, her teacher, the one who taught her the words that saved her.
His silver eyes, which were her protection and her guide, are already starting to rust in the morning light.
And Liesel is just consumed by denial, a grief so total that she cannot comprehend the reality.
Papa was a man with silver eyes, not dead ones. Papa was an accordion.
Her sorrow manifests as this final, beautiful hallucination, a vision that exists purely within the architecture of her broken heart. This is the moment where their entire relationship finds its perfect, devastating closure.
She watches an imagined scene unfold. Hans standing, fully materialized in the Alps of broken houses, the piles of debris surrounding him like mountains.
And it is strapping on his rescued instrument, the accordion, and playing one last time.
He plays with that quintessential image of his kindness. Silver eyes fixed on Liesel, a cigarette slouched casually on his lips. The bellows breathe. The music is perfect.
A final, pure lullaby played by the tall man for the girl he saved. It is the last memory she holds of him, one forged in love, not ruin.
She doesn't hold on to the hallucination forever, but she uses this power to perform her final act of acceptance.
She places the injured accordion next to his body.
She accepts that her teacher, her savior, is gone. Her final words to him are a devastating tribute, encompassing everything he gave her.
"Goodbye, Papa," she says. "You saved me. You taught me to read."
I'll never drink champagne. No one can play like you.
The book thief, the girl who survived because of the foundation he built for her, says goodbye to the man who made her world possible. It's perhaps the most difficult farewell in literature.
And with that, the physical and emotional exhaustion of these farewells forces her to be gently taken away from Himmel Street.
The immediate devastation is over, but the story of resilience is not. We move into the epilogue, part 4, Reunion and Death's Confession.
So Liesel Meminger survived the bombing and the emotional wreckage. But she was not completely alone in her survival.
No, Alex Steiner, Rudy's father, survived. He'd been away at the front, serving in the LSE, the Air Raid Special Unit.
And this is just another layer of profound irony and tragedy.
He survived the front lines only to return to an obliterated home and the loss of his entire family.
Liesel rushes to him, telling him everything about the last few years, including that agonizing detail that she had finally kissed Rudy's lips in death.
And Zusak rates that Alex Steiner was sawn apart by the news of that kiss.
Sawn apart. The idea that his son's deepest, most persistent desire was fulfilled only in the moment of his permanent absence. It's a grief that, as a listener, you could hardly imagine.
And it bonds Liesel and Alex immediately in this shared agonizing survival.
They spent many days together attempting to grasp the new reality. They walked repeatedly to the notorious Dachau after its liberation, desperately trying to find Max Vandenburg.
Only to be denied by the Americans who were managing the chaotic, horrific aftermath. They needed closure, but the world was still too broken to give it to them.
But then, months later, in October 1945, in the midst of the rebuilding and the cold reality of post-war Germany, there is a moment of pure, transcendent grace.
A man walks into Alex Steiner's tailor shop.
He's described with these specific, gentle details that Max deserves. Swampy eyes, feathers of hair, and a clean-shaven face.
Max Vandenburg has returned.
That detail of the clean-shaven face is so striking. It signals Max's transition from the hidden, perpetually hunted Jew forced to live in darkness to a free man.
A man who can walk in the sun, who has shed the need for camouflage and invisibility.
The reunion is described with such simple power. Liesel comes out, they hug, they cry.
And they fall to the floor. It is the perfect, long-delayed human moment of hope after years of darkness. It confirms that the bonds of love and kindness were stronger than the machinery of hate.
Liesel has found her other surviving family member.
Mm-hmm.
The narrative then leaps forward. We learn that Liesel lives a full, long life. She marries, has children, and eventually settles far away in Sydney, Australia.
And the story skips decades to Death's final visit to her when she is old. And at that moment, Death reveals something he has kept secret for all those years.
He shows her the book she wrote.
The book thief, which he rescued from the cleanup efforts after the bombing.
He rescued it. The source tells us Death found her most precious item thrown aboard a garbage truck amidst the cleanup. He was compelled to take it.
And he kept it, reviewing it several thousand times over the years.
This act of rescue is critical to our understanding of Death's function as the narrator. It establishes him not just as a collector of souls and an observer of destruction,
but as a preserver of stories.
Yes. He saved the evidence of human beauty from the historical garbage heap. He needed Liesel's story to make sense of the endless trauma he witnessed.
And this brings us to the thematic climax of the entire narrative, the philosophical insight that has been building since page 1, and the source of Death's chronic pain.
His final statement to Liesel and to us.
I am haunted by humans.
That phrase. It stands alone as the final, agonizing word of the book, and it defines the narrator and the entire emotional compass of the story.
Death, who is eternal, unflappable, and a necessary result of human activity, is deeply disturbed by us. He is traumatized by the sheer contradiction he is forced to witness constantly.
He struggles with that duality. He sees their ugly and their beauty, and I wonder how the same thing can be both.
And on one hand, he witnesses the immense capacity for courage and kindness, Hans sharing bread with a starving Jew, Max offering stories in defiance, Rudy risking everything to retrieve Liesel's books from the freezing river.
Small, intimate, profound acts of grace.
But on the other hand, he simultaneously witnesses the horror of our industrial capacity for destruction. Death is the one who was present at Auschwitz, at Cologne, at Hamburg. He sees the systematic, cold, efficient slaughter we inflict upon ourselves and others.
And the idea that the same species could produce both Max Vandenburg and Adolf Hitler is the thing that haunts him most deeply.
And this leads to the second, equally crucial part of his confession, Death's envy.
He envies that humans have the good sense to die.
It's a staggering thought. Why would an eternal entity envy our mortality?
Because our finite nature, our brief, defined, single existence, lends incredible weight and significance to every single action and emotion. The fact that a life is limited means that a decision to love, to shelter, to resist, or to destroy is intensely potent.
Exactly. If death were to witness an act of kindness in eternity, it would lose some of its significance. But because Hans Hubermann had limited time, because Max Vandenburg was constantly facing death,
their acts of courage resonate with such force that they manage to haunt an eternal entity like death himself. Our impermanence is what makes us magnificent.
And terrifying.
Liesel's story, the book Death Carries, is one piece of concrete evidence for humanity's beauty. It is the beautiful artifact salvaged from the collective destruction.
Her quiet act of writing, the culmination of her life, provided one of the only bright spots in Death's relentless diary. It confirmed for him, however painfully, that the beauty can, occasionally, outweigh the ugliness.
The book thief turns death from an impersonal, mythological force into a deeply affected, almost shell-shocked observer. He isn't malevolent, he is simply the accountant for humanity's choices.
And his final accounting results in a perpetual, aching confusion over our simultaneous ability to be magnificent and monstrous.
It forces us to realize that the most profound destruction is not the bombing of a street,
but the way humanity chooses to wield the gift of consciousness.
So, after following Liesel Meminger for 6 deep dives and witnessing her survival, her love, and her grief, what is the ultimate conclusion we must carry away?
I think the most powerful takeaway is that while Hitler's regime was powered by the masterful manipulation of language words used as weapons and propaganda, Liesel, Hans, and Max demonstrated that words could also be acts of fierce resistance, profound love, and life-saving kindness.
Exactly. Liesel Meminger survived the bombing, the Holocaust, and immense personal loss because of the stories she carried, the words she learned, and the stories she eventually wrote and shared.
Her ability to love and endure, even when surrounded by destruction, is the central legacy of her long, word-filled life. Her memoir is her ultimate act of defiance. It is her bearing witness to the complexity of the human spirit.
She survived because she realized that words, those lovely bastards, must be wielded with grace and intentionality.
And that leads us to the final, necessary, and provocative thought this book leaves with us.
If death, who is eternally tasked with carrying away the consequences of humanity, is rendered haunted by us, what immense responsibility do the living bear for the ugly and beautiful legacy we create every single day?
If an eternal being is struggling to process the contradictory legacy we leave behind in our short time here, perhaps we should pay closer, far closer, attention to the words we wield and the choices we make, because those choices, however small, resonate forever.
A profound truth to end on. Thank you for joining us for this final deep dive into The Book Thief.
This has been another exploration of the profound truths of human existence and the literary function of trauma and love here on Fact Horizon.
Join us next time as we continue our journey beyond the horizon.
Fact Horizon, signing off.